conversation, information, and revelation. It's the Politicrat Daily Podcast with me, Omar Moore. Subscribe now and spread the word. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Monday, December the 21st, 2020. On this edition of the Politicrat, a look at the agreement reached yesterday by bipartisan moderates in the Senate for a bill that will help the American people, but not as much as millions of Americans had hoped. A look too at the House of Representatives under the Democrats, and the question must be asked, is it time for a new House Speaker? And is it not time to get Mitch McConnell out of the majority leadership position in the Senate? Right now, there is only one state that can do that. And it is not Kentucky. That and one or two other things coming up next. It was only a winter's tale, just another winter's tale. And why would the world take notice of one more love that's failed? It's a love that would never be, though it meant a lot to you and me. On a worldwide scale, it's just another winter's tale. Oh, dearie me, I sing David Essex this morning, the English singer. Actually, I think he's Welsh. I'm not, oh gosh, I'll get in trouble. David Essex will slap me down if I don't get his nationality correct. But anyway, A Winter's Tale, a really lovely song from way back when. One of my favorites of, I think it was the 1970s. Wasn't that 70s? Early 80s? Anyway, we are in winter. This is, I think, the first full day of winter, or the first day of winter. The first part of winter, winter solstice, or whatever. We are in here on Monday, December the 21st, 2020. And thank you very much for listening. We are here, and, over 300,000 people have died here in the U.S. We have almost 2 million people now. I mean, we're right near there, if not already past it. 2 million people worldwide have died from the coronavirus. And we wake up in the United States to the reality today that there is no adequate financial protection for the average person. We have news of a deal that was agreed to by the congressional leaders in both the Republican and Democratic parties, and Mitch McConnell getting up there and puffing out his chest. And then you realize that the people who need the money are going to get it, but we don't know when. $600 of stimulus checks. That's... Has anybody looked out of the window? Have you looked out your window? If you're in the U.S., have you looked out your window wherever you are on the planet and realized that there are people on food lines? There are people who are hungry. There are people who don't have homes. People who don't have any roof over their head whatsoever. Whoa, what a savage morning. What a savage day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening to this. Whether you're well off or you're not well off, whether you are comfortably financial in terms of your standing, whether you're precarious, paycheck to paycheck, whether you're counting your blessings 4 days before Christmas or whether you are dreading these days and have had the most horrible of years, there is really nothing to celebrate about this stimulus agreement. Mitch McConnell walked away like the chicken that he is. Back in May, even before then, he walked away from any talks for another round of stimulus payments for the American public that's suffering. And at the same time, we were told, and even before then, that Jeff Bezos was making billions of dollars on stock deals, stock that he sold. That Kelly Loeffler, the Republican senator, who you must vote out, Georgia, did trading. And her husband owns the company that owns the New York Stock Exchange. And as she sold stock in January and in February of 2020, she did so following confidential briefings of the Senate during, I might add, the impeachment sham trial of Donald Trump that, of course, Mitch McConnell presided over. One fixed camera, no witnesses to testify. That's truly the fascist era that we are in here in the United States, which has always been, long been a fascist country. The merger of corporate and government interests has never been more pronounced than it is right now. And there's other different dimensions of fascism that are really obvious here in the United States. And I think that it is time for people to wake up and push the agenda that I have been suggesting for weeks and weeks here. You have to find the issues that really do matter to you and start getting up on a soapbox with other people that you know and reach out to other like-minded people out here. Form a group, form a coalition, and start getting active. Believe me, this is the way that this stuff gets done. You have to do it because a lot of people are not happy with these developments that happened last night. $600 is not going to be enough to stimulate an economy. One $600 check for people who are making, I guess it's $75,000 or less. Not one check per week. Not one check of $6,000. But one check of $600. With the food lines reminiscent of the first Republican Great Depression in the 1920s and early 30s. We have a Republican Great Depression Part 2 here. That's what we have. It's not a deep recession. It's not recession Part 2. It's a Republican Great Depression. The Republican policies of these last 40 years and the neoliberal policies of some of these Democratic presidents, including Obama, including Clinton. I think those are the only two Democrats we've had in this 40-year period. In fact, I know that those are the only two Democratic presidents that we've had. Of course, we're going to have a third coming up in 30 days from now. Exactly 30 days. We will have Joe Biden in the White House. And as I've said before here, we need an agenda. People need to start organizing. Because while the election is over, And while the inauguration will happen in 30 days from today, there is lots of work, not only that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have to do, but there's work that we as voters and listeners have to do here in the United States in particular. There's some sound that I'm going to be playing. It's the evolution of what's been going on. Mitch McConnell has to go. There is no question about it. He has got to go as majority leader. We cannot have Mitch McConnell as majority leader of the United States Senate. And the only way that happens is if people in Georgia vote Jon Ossoff and Reverend Warnock into the U.S. Senate. That's step number one. The people of Georgia must speak loudly and clearly, because the Republicans are going to do what they've always been doing over the last 50 to 60 years, suppressing the votes of black voters. Suppressing the votes of black voters. So far, the news is good in the sense that we have a situation where 1.3 to 1.4 million people have already voted in the early voting. That is very encouraging. It is much along the same trajectory that Georgia voters operated on just over a month plus ago, when millions of people in Georgia, millions of them, voted early. And it proved to be the difference for Joe Biden. And it looks as if, or sounds as if, voters in Georgia have received this message loudly and clearly to vote for Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. It's such a critically important election, these two runoff races in Georgia, because whoever wins those runoff races will determine what this country looks like over the next 4 years. Joe Biden has actively said that he is not really going to do too much to help out the progressive agenda. There is audio of this. I don't really want to play it now because I want to play other audio. I will play that audio sometime this week, which is why it is important to put an agenda together. I've said this for so long now. Write down the 3 issues that matter the most to you. Write down a sentence or 2 about each of them and why they matter. Maybe do some research on them. Maybe rely on your own personal experience with these issues that are so near and dear to your heart. Meet with like-minded people, friends, family, whomever. Do Zoom meetings. Invite people in your social media to participate with you, to discuss these things. Put them on your social media page. Engage people. This is the time to do it. We have to participate more to the extent that we are able to. There's lots of people who've got lots of other things going on, and they obviously will not have that kind of time to do that. But it doesn't require an hour. It literally is 15 minutes. Literally. It is important that we do this because we're the ones who can chart this course. Rosa Parks did the same thing. Amelia Boynton did the same thing. John Lewis did the same thing. Dr. King did the same thing. C.T. Vivian did the same thing. Joseph Lowery did the same. I can go on and on and on and on. Diane Nash, who is still with us, has done the same thing. A country doesn't change because politicians grow a conscience. Politicians change, and a country changes because you, the people, we the people, push it to change, fight for it to change, die for it to change. There is no mistaking that fact. History shows us this. I honestly don't think, whether you are someone comfortably financial or not, I should say comfortably well off, comfortably financial, but I don't think that people honestly can say that they think that $600, except if you're Mitch McConnell and these billionaires who think that $600 is probably too much money. You can't, in all honesty, think that that's enough money, can you? I don't think you can. 11 more weeks of enhanced federal unemployment benefits for those of you who are unemployed. Do you think that $300 extra for 11 weeks is going to help you sufficiently? I mean, look, I'm not saying that it's not money. It's not 300 jelly beans. It's not 300 Maltesers. It's not 300 marbles. It's $300. People must realize that taxes are going to have to be paid on this stuff. And this is taxpayer money that was haggled over for months. Mitch McConnell was AWOL. That's another reason that you should be voting for, if you are in Georgia, Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. Mitch McConnell is no kind of leader. He is a vulture. He is a disaster capitalist. And the only reason he continues to get voted in like he did last month is because the people just don't want. Well, let me just put it this way. You've got a lot of racists and misogynists all over this country and around the world. And while, put it like this even, Mitch McConnell has done nothing for Kentucky. Nothing. Nothing at all. Kentucky, if you look at the statistics, they are in the bottom 6 or 7 in nearly every category. Healthcare, because of course when the governor there a few years back had said Kentucky Connect, it freaked people out who loved Kentucky Connect, but when they were told it was Obamacare, oh my God, I can't deal with that because that black man over there is, oh my gosh. And so the racism kicked in for these white voters. I do think that we need to do better. Mitch McConnell may be in the Senate, but do you really want him to be majority leader for the next 6 years? He's going to have a brand new term of 6 years beginning next month. And there is only one state that can do something about that. That is the state of Georgia. Mitch McConnell has done nothing but give billionaires tax cuts. He's a ruthless politician who knows how to use power and wield it. And he's taking a victory lap yesterday evening. This is a guy who literally a few weeks ago offered a $500 billion bill. And it got laughed off the Senate floor. And he knew that it would be laughed off the Senate floor. He did this shortly before the general election, so that what he could do for his political purposes is say, hey, look, I put a bill on the floor, and they voted against it. Well, of course they would vote against a $500 $200 billion bill. Especially when you had offers of $2.2 trillion from Speaker Pelosi and $1.8 trillion from the soon-to-be outgoing Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. That's just the beginning of my conversation or my soliloquy. Because the attention now is going to be focused on Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. I think you may understand why. Coming up next.
And Madam Speaker, I certainly respect you, but I also respect Ro Khanna. I respect Andrew Yang. I respect members of the Democrats who are members of the problem solvers. They want a deal because so many people right now are suffering.
Well, the problem solvers, by the way, don't have any earned income tax credit or child tax credit in their proposal either. But let's not go into that.
Yeah,
you evidently do not respect the chairman of the committees who wrote these bills.
I respect
and
all of you.
I wish you would respect the knowledge that goes into getting meeting the needs of the American people. But again, you've been on a jag defending the administration all this time with no knowledge of the difference between our two bills. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that to you in person.
Right. Madam Speaker, these are incredibly difficult times right now, and we'll leave it on that note. Thank you so much for joining us.
We'll leave it on the vote that you are not right on this, Wolf, and I hate to say that to you. But I feel confident about it, and I feel confident about my colleagues, and I feel confidence in my chairs.
And it's not about me. It's about millions of Americans who can't put food on the table, who can't pay the rent.
And we represent them. And we represent them.
Getting by
we represent
these
them.
long food
and
lines
we
that we're seeing.
Them.
I know
we
you
know
are.
Them.
I'm just saying.
We represent them and we know them.
As we say.
We know them. We represent them.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, as they say here in Washington.
It is nowhere near perfect.
Madam Speaker.
Always the case, but we're not even close to the good.
All right, let's see what happens, because every day is critically, critically important. Because every day is critically, critically important. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for your sensitivity to our constituents' needs.
I am sensitive to them because I see them on the street begging for food, begging for money. Madam Speaker, thank you so much.
Have you fed them? We feed them. We feed them.
We'll continue this conversation down the road for sure. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. That was a portion of an interview that Speaker Nancy Pelosi did with Wolf Blitzer back in, I guess it was October of 2020. October or late September. I think it was October. And it was a notable interview because it was the first time I had heard somebody really question Speaker Pelosi. Now, I thought Wolf Blitzer got a lot of it wrong because he didn't know what he was talking about and the problem with the corporate news media in the United States is the fact that the nuance is often ignored, and deliberately so, because that's not sexy. That doesn't make for good ratings. That does not accrue to the short attention span theater that we are all swimming in. The soundbite theater that we tend to consume really now without any kind of thinking. It's not all our fault. I mean, we've got technology, we've got iPhones, we've got this, we've got that. We don't look where we're going when we cross the street, some of us, because we have our heads buried in our phones. When we're driving, we may have a chance to glance at the screen in front of us, that phone that may be sitting on our laps, maybe while we're driving, maybe while we're at a stoplight. We seem to be losing our compasses. We seem to be losing our compasses. There was a chance to do a deal earlier this year. There was a chance to do a deal. And the interview that you heard there, part of it at least, was done at a time where there could have been a deal done that could have got people all across this country, the United States, some real relief. Some people are speculating that Speaker Pelosi is the issue and the problem, and that she somehow was deliberately avoiding getting a deal done because any kind of deal being done before the election would help Donald Trump. Could that be true? It could be true. It could not be true. Ultimately, you will have to decide if that is too cynical for you to stomach, that a politician could possibly do something like that. That is your call to make. I think in the annals of any skullduggery, that would be quite mild, wouldn't it? I'm going to subject the American public to more prolonged misery to avoid the American public being prolonged for subject to 4 more years of prolonged misery. I mean, which would you pick? Would you pick the first option of, if you're in this position, starving for another 2 months? Or would you pick the option of, my goodness me, there's 4 more years of this orange cretin, but I do have food in my belly, and I do have my family of 5 with food in their stomachs, and I do have a roof over my head? What would you pick? Honestly, if you were in that position that I just described, you have a family of 5, you're out of work, you've got a roof over your head, but it's tentative, and you've got this orange maggot in the White House. But there is a stimulus check coming that is $1,200, not $600. And you might have 16 more weeks of federal unemployment compensation. But the price for that is you're going to have 4 more years of Donald Trump. Which would you pick? No, it's not an unfair question, by the way. It's not an unfair question. Some do think that Speaker Pelosi decided not to do this deal before the election for any perceived risk, this perception that somehow Donald Trump has somehow won the election cycle before it really begins. I mean, early voting was going on during the time that you heard this interview. Well, not this moment. I mean, when the interview aired with Wolf Blitzer and Speaker Pelosi back in October. I think it was October the 13th of this year. It was October 13th. And this is what happened. Early voting was going on all around the country. It had been going on for 6 weeks. It began, or 5 weeks. It began on September the 4th, 2020 in North Carolina. That was the vote by mail that happened. That's what started the election season here in the United States. There are stories, and I keep talking about this. There was an article that said that there was never any kind of deal, and that's the truth. And you will understand that. Because we are a society that is wrapped up in numbers. How many numbers are you doing? How many people are listening to your podcast? How many people are following you on Twitter? How many people viewed your video? How many subscribers do you have? Number. But there is more to it than numbers. In the case of 300,000+ people, in the case of around 2 million people globally, There is more to it than numbers. There are people behind those numbers. People behind those numbers. Do you know that there are families behind those numbers? Children behind those numbers who won't see their father again, their mother again, their brother again, their sister. These people are human beings with lives that they had, people that they've lost, joy and memory and love and laughter and light that they don't have and will never have again. This isn't about numbers. This is about lives. And as I keep saying, we need to have media that fosters a recognition amongst people that those who have died from this virus are not forgotten in a blaze or a haze of numbers. Their names need to be on the screen every day. Every single day. Their faces need to be displayed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that people do not become numb. Some people might still say, I'm just numb. I've had enough of all of this. I can't cope with the death, the loss. It's too much. I understand that view. When I had Christina Patterson on this podcast just yesterday, that was one of the things that we spoke about the mental health. And I brought this up to her, and she spoke about this and certainly was in agreement. The mental health costs that we as a globe will be enduring. There is so much of that comes into play here. The kinds of mental health that we're going to have to do, and we're going to be doing it as this pandemic continues. I have long said on this podcast that I want to get a mental health professional on, and I am still trying to do that. Obviously, we are reaching the Christmas holiday season. We are in it. We've got the Festival of Eid, I believe, coming up shortly as well. If you're someone who's Muslim, who observes that as well. You've got Kwanzaa coming up in 5 days, Christmas in 4 days. We've just had Hanukkah, and whichever other holidays, celebrations, or observances that people do or don't do are coming up. And that brings another mental health challenge. And it's just been so difficult to get a mental health professional on. I am going to continue to try, because those of you who listen to this podcast, and if you listen to it on a regular basis, this is something that's really important for all of us. How do we cope with all of this? And I do promise to devote an episode to that, because next year is going to be pretty darn challenging because of the kinds of things, particularly in the United States, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be walking into, which is why we have to build these agendas. But I want to get back to Speaker Pelosi, because this is not just about numbers. It really isn't. I have defended Speaker Pelosi on many an occasion here, even though I've not voted for her in the last 2 or 3 election cycles. I can readily put up my hand now and say that. Of course, you can't see me put my hand up, but I assure you, my hand is up right now. And there's lots of reasons why I did not vote for her. I've voted for her in the past. I just haven't the last 2 or 3 election cycles. And I'm not going to get into whys. I mean, the whys and the why nots are things that I think can be litigated another day. I do want to say I think that Speaker Pelosi has done rather well in terms of the last 2 years. I do think that she has done well. Meaning that under her tutelage the last 2 years, I guess it's the 117th Congress, there has been a record number of bits of legislation that have been passed through the House, strengthening elections, election protection, voting provisions, all manner of things. Including, the CARES Act, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which is not perfect, but it's definitely better than what Tim Scott in the Senate was trying to put forward. I mean, that was a joke. Including the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. I mean, I'm not saying that Speaker Pelosi has not done well these last 2 years with the legislation. And yeah, we know all of this legislation has died on the desk of Mitch McConnell, which is why I was saying in the prior segment that it is imperative that the people of Georgia make sure that we have a democratically controlled Senate and that Mitch McConnell, therefore, is no longer the Senate Majority Leader. We just cannot afford that. We cannot. Because what will happen is that the Democratic Party will lose the House in 2022. And quite frankly, that will happen in 2 scenarios, or 2 reasons why I think that will happen if Democrats do not wake up and if voters do not put Ossoff and Warnock in as U.S. senators. Number one reason this will happen for 2022 is that if you have Mitch McConnell in there again, he will just gum up the works again for at least 6 more years, or for however many years that the House is in Democratic control, and you will not see anything passed, which is why these two Georgia runoffs are critical. And what will happen is that even though Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are obstructing, the voters do not care. Some of the voters will be so angry, they will blame it on the Speaker of the House, which is what they will do and have done. And I have said to you before that one of the reasons why the House Democrats lost a load of these seats last month was not because of defund the police. There's always a boogeyman that the Republicans or some of these corporate Democrats want to put up there to scare you. There's always a boogeyman. And defund the police is the 2020 boogeyman for some of these House Democrats, these moderates. My contention is that the House Democrats lost seats, many of them centrists, most if not all of them centrists, because they did not get a stimulus deal passed. And I think that voters looked at Speaker Pelosi, rightly or wrongly, and decided to pin an L on her. And by definition, took that out on the Democratic centrists who were running in these areas. And I don't care that they were running in Republican areas or not. Heck, when the 2018 midterms happened, you had Democrats winning in Republican areas, especially here in California. down in Southern California, particularly Orange County. All those seats turned from Republican to Democratic. And then what have we had since? We had a vengeful ex-husband who published these pictures of then Representative Katie Hill naked, published pictures of Katie Hill, then Congresswoman Katie Hill, having an affair with another woman. Then, we had that vengeful, cretinous piece of crap ex-husband of Katie Hill's doing that, releasing her pictures without her consent, putting her personal affairs and the things that you would keep in-house, presumably, as a married couple. You had a scumbag who decided, well, I'm going to release that stuff. I mean, it's just, I'm going to release pictures of Katie Hill smoking a bong. Oh, wow, that's great. She's naked and she's smoking a bong, and that's going to make for good TV, right? That's going to make for good internet copies. And so people latch onto that stuff. And then the Democratic replacement lost the seat to a Republican. Then what happened? These centrists did not run a strong enough campaign to meet the needs of the people. And because of that, the voters said, to hell with you. You're not running for anything. You're not standing for anything. We got people on food lines. And you're not offering us anything. I'm going to vote Republican. I told you, and I'll tell you again, dear listener, I called voters in numerous states in the run-up to the election for president in this country in 2020. And I spoke to voters, including in Pennsylvania, one of whom said to me that he was going to vote for Donald Trump if Speaker Pelosi did not get a stimulus deal done. Now, I don't know what kind of media he listens to, that voter that I called. I don't know whether he's a Republican or a Democrat or whatever he might be. Whether he's a misogynist or a racist or whatever he is, or not. But I do know that there is a sentiment out here that says, you guys are in power, I don't care about the nuance. All I know is I see you on TV every day, and I see you talking, I see you talking, and I see you talking. And I don't see my situation changing. I see you in power, and I see me here, and nothing is changing. Therefore, you are out. And quite frankly, I think that attitude is what really happened in these races, where voters were so angry and frustrated and said, to hell with it. I'd rather vote for someone who actually stands for something, even if it's to the detriment of me. I'm just fed up with people who walk in and say they're going to do something for the American public and then sit on an opportunity to do something for the American public. And then, weeks and weeks after the election, we get this watered down, really $300 billion bill, because a lot of this money that is part of this 600 or 900 billion that you're hearing about is money that's been left over from the previous CARES Act that was passed in May or in April, whenever it was, May. But, you don't get, that's the nuance that you don't get. That's the nuance. The nuance is the reason why this deal didn't get done in October is that the Republicans wanted to spend the $1.8 trillion in ways that were detrimental to the American public. They wanted this liability insurance provision. And by the way, the liability insurance provision is still around in this bill, or at least it has been disaggregated from this, whatever, $700 billion bill. The $900 billion that you're hearing about, there's supposedly a split. There's a $700 billion bit to this bill. And then there's a $160 billion to $200 billion bit that includes the liability insurance provisions that Mitch McConnell had been begging for. So if you as a worker have some issue and you are going to work and you don't want to go into work, but you have to because of coronavirus and people didn't want to, because they didn't want to get the virus, and you had people like Governor Kim Reynolds, the Republican in Iowa, saying, well, we're going to force you to lose your unemployment because you refuse to go to work. So you can't claim unemployment. Well, the people refused to go to work because they were afraid to catch coronavirus. They were afraid. They had families they had to look after. And what good are you to yourself or to your family, to your kids? If you as a man or a woman, if you as a person are sick with coronavirus and dying from it. Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, we're not going to allow you to have unemployment. We're not going to allow that because you didn't choose to work. And quite frankly, these liability insurance provisions and these bills that are being gleefully paraded around now as some kind of victory lap on this Monday include this idea that if you get coronavirus on the job, you as a worker cannot sue these people. You cannot sue your employer. That's what this liability provision is in part about. So this is the thing that's just really twisted. And Speaker Pelosi made a statement that just drives me up the wall. This is what she said 17 days ago. I want to play this in context. And I've played it before actually on this podcast. Not too long ago either. First, you're going to hear from someone asking a question of her, a man. You may not be able to make out the entire thing that he asks, but he essentially asks her to, he asks her about the Problem Solver Committee, and I don't know who they are. I've not taken the time to look and research them, and I should have, but I did not. Shame on me. The Problem Solver Committee were a group of people who have been working on this bill, and they had come up with a higher number prior to the election. The first person you're going to hear, this male reporter, is going to ask her about that. She will answer that, and then the next question you will hear is from CNN's Manu Raju. Listen carefully to his question. He's the second question. And listen to Speaker Pelosi's answer. This lasts approximately, 4 minutes. You've got to listen to this.
Just to be clear here, you said no continuing resolution.
I don't want any help.
Right, I understand that, but if you are on the precipice of getting a coronavirus D, and you can't, if you are on the precipice...
We'll be on before that.
Okay. But what shifted, in your opinion, when the Problem Solvers Caucus had a much larger bill a few months ago? You did not like that piece of legislation. What has shifted now when they're on board with this piece that's come out of the Senate?
Perhaps you missed what I said earlier. Joe Biden committed to ending and crushing the virus and having a Build a Better America initiative, Build Back Better, a vaccine, answer to our prayers, an answer to our prayers of 95% effectiveness in terms of Pfizer and Moderna, and there may be others. coming forward. That is a total game changer. A new president and a vaccine. So there's nothing to, these are different. What was then before was not more of this. This has simplicity. It's what we've had in our bills. It's for a shorter period of time, but that's okay now because we have a new president, a president who recognizes that we need to depend on science to stop the virus, a president who understands that America's working families need to have money in their pockets in a way that takes them into the future without any of the contraptions of any of the other bills that the administration was associating itself with them before. We feel very excited about the prospect that there's a bipartisan bill, because I told members I'm not bringing any more bills that are not bipartisan. We wanted to show what needs to be done in the interest of negotiation. They're negotiating. It's a good product. It's not everything we want. Don't get me wrong. I don't want the Republicans to think that that this is a dream come true. It is not. But it is a path forward. Yeah.
Was it a mistake not to accept half of a loaf months ago when you said, I'm not going to accept half a loaf?
Look, I'm going to tell you something. Don't characterize what we did before as a mistake, as a preface to your question, if you want an answer. That was not a mistake. It was a decision, and it has taken us to a place where we can do the right thing without other, shall we say, considerations in the legislation that we don't want. Now, that is it. Now, the fact is, I'm very proud of where we are. My chairs have worked very hard on all of this. They were not even happy with a proposal that we made the other day before we saw this proposal. They thought we had come back too small. So it's not about an individual. It's about how we address the needs of the American people. And we have to do it in a scientific way, and we have to do it in a way that recognizes people need food on the table. They need to get their rent paid. They need money in their pockets. They need their unemployment insurance to be there. They do not need a whole cacophony of other things that are on the agenda that have nothing to do with meeting their needs. So we're very pleased at where it is. And as I say, with a Democratic president committed to a scientific solution for this, with the idea that we will have a vaccine, it's a complete game changer from them.
At the time that press conference happened, and I played it on this podcast, I declared it to be an absolutely disqualifying thing for a Speaker of the House to say. We have a vaccine now. That's a game changer. We have a new president. So it's okay now. The relief isn't not going to be as long as we want it to be. But we have a new president now. That's okay, you see. That's okay. We got a new president and a vaccine. And you may remember, if you are someone who listens regularly to this podcast, hearing yours truly say the following: will a vaccine put food on the table of a family of four? Of a family of four. Will a vaccine put food on the table for you? Will a vaccine put food on the table for people on the food lines? Will a president be able to do that? Will President Biden do that? Will he put food on your table? And by the way, going back to the original point I made, you need to vote, Georgia, for Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. Because the pronouncements of Speaker Pelosi talking about, well, we have a new president, that in and of itself is not going to be enough As all of the people who run for the president say, or at least some of them, especially on the Democratic side, they say this, one person alone cannot change things. President Obama said that, and he was right. But he was not the only one to say it. Bernie Sanders, who did not succeed in either of his two attempts at the White House, has also said this, as have many others. It's not about one person. It's about all of us. And Joe Biden will only be as strong as not only the 81.2 million people who voted for him, but also as strong as the U.S. senators who are in the Senate by the time he takes the oath of office in 30 days. If we have a democratically controlled Senate, there is a lot more that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can do. If we have a Senate that continues to be controlled by the Republicans, with the Grim Reaper still in control of the majority leadership, then Joe Biden's presidency is going to amount to very little. And what you will end up having is a Republican takeover again. There is grave risk of that happening. With tone-deaf comments like those of the Speaker of the House on that December 4th press conference, and then the way she scolds Manu Raju of CNN, as if to say, how dare you ask me a question? And by the way, I know she didn't actually say those words, but it was this, how dare you ask me a question in that way? Manu Raju didn't insult her. Manu Raju didn't disrespect her as a speaker. Manu Raju actually did his job, which is something that a lot of people in the corporate news media do not do. And they do not do it well enough. And they do not do it consistently enough. Oh, of course, there's some people that do their jobs in the corporate news media. I can call their names. I've called their names before. And they do a good job. But there is a vast majority who just are lazy. And they are lazy because their bosses tell them, you can't push the needle too much here because we want these people to appear on our shows. Speaker Pelosi rarely gets questioned in the way that you just heard from Manu Raju in that second question. And do you know something, dear listener? That pretty much since then, back on December 4th, when that press conference took place, do you know that Speaker Pelosi has gone out of her way to stop taking questions from Manu Raju? Do you know that? I wouldn't make this up. I don't make these things up. I'm reading from some tweets from Manu Raju at MK, Michael Catherine with a K, or I should say Katie. Michael, Katie, Roger, Alexandra, Joanne, Ukiah, MKRAJU. That is the Twitter handle of CNN reporter Manu Raju. I'm going to read these out. This is from December 20th. That would be yesterday, Sunday. December 20th, 2020. Manu Raju's first tweet. Pelosi wouldn't answer my question about why the $900 billion deal is more acceptable to her than the $1.8 trillion offer Mnuchin made to her this fall. Do you see anything wrong with that question? Do you hear anything that's wrong with that question? Second tweet in the thread from Manu Raju. Pelosi would not call on me at the press conference, which is becoming a pattern, even though just 5 reporters were there. She left the press conference as I asked her the question, and she ignored my question in the hallway as well. Why wouldn't you call on Manu Raju? Did Manu Raju in that December 4th press conference I played you earlier, did he attack Speaker Pelosi personally? Did he disrespect her? Did he call her out of her name? Did he call her everything but a child of God? So then why isn't she calling on him? That's the question I have. Here's the third tweet from Manu Raju. This is yesterday, December 20th, 2020. Asked again in the hallways why this proposal is more acceptable than the Mnuchin plan, Pelosi didn't respond. But Schumer, who was walking with her in the hallway, said, quote, "Ask Mitch McConnell," end quote. Is this the kind of Democratic leadership that the American public should be having? Or do we want Democrats with a bit more backbone and new, fresh ideas? Do we not want Democrats who are going to fight for the American public instead of turn tail and run and meekly say things like, "Ask Mitch McConnell"? I mean, as much as I do want Chuck Schumer to be the next majority leader in the Senate, comments like those do not inspire much confidence. Blaming the hatchet man, the Grim Reaper, and he should be blamed, is not going to suffice. It's not going to suffice for a great number of people in this country. There's going to be a cross-section of people who aren't going to be satisfied with "Ask Mitch McConnell." The truth is that they know who Mitch McConnell is. And quite frankly, there's some people who actually begrudgingly respect and admire the guy for being the evil that he is. He's an evil you-know-what. And he's a very, very shrewd politician, as much as it pains me to say. He knows exactly what he's doing. What are Pelosi and Schumer doing? Do they know what they're doing? I didn't even get to these other tweets. Here's the other one from Manu Raju. It's true, he says here in this tweet from yesterday, that McConnell and Senate Republicans objected to Mnuchin's $1.8 trillion plan. And I remember that, by the way. Back to the tweet. But so did Pelosi, who said in October, quote, "This proposal amounted to 1 step forward, 2 steps back," end quote. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. And I just think that some of these folks who are supporting Pelosi and attacking Manu Raju, oh, well, you have to frame the question better than that. You have to frame it's a gotcha. Is it a gotcha question? Is it a gotcha question to ask Speaker Pelosi, is half a loaf of bread better than none? Is that really? I mean, I quite frankly think that there are sections of the public that actually like that kind of a question. Rather than the same formulaic stuff. Why can't people in power be raised to deal with critical questions? Why can't critical questions be raised of people in power? Why does it have to be phrased in a way that makes someone comfortable? There was nothing offensive about Manu Raju's December 4th question. The man asked a question. He asked, "Why do you think that half a loaf is better than none?" I'm paraphrasing. Where's the insult in that question? Where's the gotcha in it? That's really a gotcha question? I mean, that's how far we've sunk in the media, where you've got reporters chiding Manu Raju on Twitter because Manu Raju has the temerity to ask a question, and then you turn around and insult him and tell him to go back to J school? When journalism is in the pits long before anybody named Manu Raju came along to CNN. Why don't you go and talk to Bill Clinton about journalism? Why don't you go and talk to him about his 1996 Telecommunications Act? And why don't you talk to people in the FCC in 1987? I don't know, maybe they're still here, maybe they're not. Under Ronald Reagan, and he scrapped the fairness doctrine through the FCC. Talking about Manu Raju asking a question. Oh, it's easy, isn't it, to go after the one reporter? Go after CNN then. Go after them having split screen after split screen. And go after them about having 6 pundits around the table and making a freaking fortune off of a pundit industrial complex. I think that Speaker Pelosi should stand down as Speaker. I don't think that the Speaker is going to be, put it like this, if the House Democrats want to keep their control of the House, I think there is going to have to be a change in the Speaker. There is a Speaker's election coming on January the 6th. Speaker Pelosi is running for a 4th term as Speaker of the House. There is a petition that is going around on social media and elsewhere. I got an email on this yesterday. I'm going to read this to you because I think this is important. This is from an organization called the Action Network. We demand that every progressive in Congress refuse to vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House until she publicly pledges to bring Medicare for All to the floor of the House for a vote in January. Representative Nancy Pelosi is running for a 4th term as Speaker of the House. The election is in the first week of January, and this time, because Democrats lost seats in the House and were left with a slim majority, she needs votes from congressional progressives to get re-elected. Pelosi is refusing to bring Medicare for All to the floor of the House for a vote in the middle of a pandemic that has killed 300,000 Americans. Voters sent progressives to Congress to fight for Medicare for All, and this is their fleeting moment of leverage. Establishment Democrats make demands of Pelosi for their votes, and so should progressives. Wall Street makes demands of Pelosi for their support, and so should progressives. This is the worst health crisis in a century, and millions have lost their employer-based coverage. 72% of Americans want Medicare for all, and every other major country on earth guarantees health care to all people as a right. Democrats ran under the banner of, quote, health care is a human right, end quote. But it's easy to campaign on or sponsor legislation that will never come up for a vote. A vote on Medicare for all will show the country who really supports it, not just with words, but with action. Then we can hold our representatives accountable. We deserve to know who sides with the people. We put the squad and House progressives in office to stand up to Nancy Pelosi, establishment Democrats, and the insurance corporations that fund them. This is a rare moment where Pelosi needs something from progressives. It could be years before we have another chance, and millions of people do not have that long. I'm going to skip ahead to the final part here of this preamble to what is a petition. And actually, I'm going to link to that petition. I normally don't link to petitions, but I do think this is urgent. There are people who don't have health care, people who don't have it. We're the richest nation on earth. We should be able to do this. We can do this. People in power do not have the moral courage to do it or the political courage to do it. That's why we still have what we've got. Petitioning every member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and every Democrat who ran on Medicare for All, including Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Ayanna Pressley, Representative Barbara Lee, Representative Chuy Garcia, Representative Cori Bush, Representative Ilhan Omar, Representative Jamal Bowman, Representative Jamie Raskin, Representative Katie Porter, Representative Maureen Newman, Representative Mark Pocan, Representative Pramila Jayapal, Representative Rashida Tlaib, Representative Rahul Grijalva, Representative Ro Khanna. These are the 15 names I've just read out, folks. These are progressives. Each and every one of them is a progressive. The Action Network is the progressive organization that wrote that. And I got that in my inbox. I'm actually going to link to that petition. You can decide whether you are going to sign it or whether you're not. But we are going through a pandemic. By the time we get to the end of January, we could have over 500,000 people dead in the United States from this coronavirus. There's a very sad possibility that could happen. And we will have well over 2 million people globally who have died from the coronavirus, COVID-19. You're seeing this happen all over the world. Countries are locking down. The United Kingdom is persona non grata. Nobody wants to deal with, why shouldn't it? Why should the Netherlands allow my native country to fly to it? Why should Turkey? Why should Germany? Why should any of these countries? They all have said no. And this is in the middle of a Brexit mess that is going to result in a no deal. This is the reality, folks. You've got trucks and lorries trapped in Dover. They're just sitting there, miles long. You talk about miles long food lines. You got miles long truck lines in Dover. The port of Dover, it's been closed. These trucks can't make the trip that they make every day because of this pandemic, because of Boris Johnson's miserable, pathetic leadership in quotes. In quotes, leadership. The word leadership, put quotes around that word. As I said, and as Christina Patterson said yesterday on this podcast, all this guy wanted to be was world king. That's all Boris Johnson was interested in, just being prime minister. He's wanted to be prime minister forever. And here in the US, all I am seeing is people who just want power and to stay in power. And yes, it's true as Action Network says, is that it's very true that people are, they're in power. They're in power. This is and everybody lobbies. This is why I keep saying we've got to have an agenda. Wall Street lobbies. Wall Street's pushing Joe Biden. You don't think Wall Street is pushing Joe Biden? So why aren't we pushing him? Why aren't we raising critical questions of him and of Harris? I voted for them. I met Kamala Harris, and I'm going to frame that photo I have with her. Frame it. Because a year before just over a year before she would be elected as a vice president. My goodness, you don't think I'm going to frame that picture? But I'm also going to raise critical questions and push an agenda that is a people-centered agenda that's important for generations to come, for kids, for all of us. A woman's right to choose is on the line. Healthcare is on the line. This is why the Action Network has put out this petition, which I'm going to link to in the liner notes of this episode. Speaker Pelosi doesn't want to bring Medicare for All up? Are you kidding? That should be fighting words for you. Really? And there she was talking to Manu Raju. Don't question me like that if you want an answer from me. And here she is. She's not going to bring up Medicare for All. She doesn't believe in Medicare for All, by the way. She's no fan of it. Joe Biden isn't. Neither of them are. Green New Deal, she's sketchy on that. She doesn't like that. And you think that she should stay as Speaker? I mean, I'm all for getting rid of Mitch McConnell. I just talked about him. He's got to go. But I think the Democratic Party has got to take a long, hard look, especially the progressives, and start to make hay, please. You have some leverage, make some leverage. And do not capitulate. Marcia Fudge threatened. Let me clean that up. Martha Fudge said to Speaker Pelosi, and I've talked about this before, if you do not have, I certainly talked about it offline to people I know, if you do not have black women as the heads of these committees, and you don't have more visible black folk in these places, I'm going to run against you. Marcia Fudge at one point was the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. She has considerable power. And you don't want to tick off the CBC. And now Representative Fudge is going to be a member of the Biden administration. I would have loved to have seen her in agriculture instead of housing and urban, instead of HUD, housing and urban development. But there you have it. I guess you take what you get when the forthcoming president of the United States offers you a job. You don't turn around and go, I'll think about it. I mean, look, HUD is not the end of the world. Listen to me. HUD is very important. Very, very important, especially during this pandemic. And the guy that's presently in HUD has basically gone to the bathroom on it for 4 years. The gifted hands guy, you know who the gifted hands guy is. If you don't know, look up gifted hands and put the word book next to it. And then you will get the answer to the mystery guest, the mystery person I'm speaking about. But it is time for people to put up or you know what up. It is time to do that. Shut the you know what up or get busy pushing these politicians who've let you down. You cannot sit here on this day or any other that you may be listening to this and say that Mitch McConnell has done a good job. You cannot sit here and say that these Republicans have done a good job. Well, they have for the billionaire class, because they're going to be the ones that are most likely going to do very damn well out of this. And for the corporations who have these liability protections, I mean, yeah, they've done their job for them. Maybe they've done a good job for them, but they've crapped all over the American public, so they have to go. These are people who don't believe in elections. These are people who don't believe in your right to vote. They have to go. And these House Democrats in the leadership positions need to be changed. They've had their fun. They've had their time in the sun. And now it's time to get another one. Someone different. Someone to move us through the 21st century with new, fresh ideas. Even President Obama said something akin to this just a few short weeks ago. in the midst of peddling his book, which I still have not been very excited about. I'm reading it now, or I'm trying to, and I'm getting nothing from that book. And all the press and the media, they blew that thing up, and you go look on these review sites, 3.5 stars out of 5. Not 4.5, not 5, 3.5. It's an underwhelming read so far. 717 pages, and I'm on page, 23? I can't get through this book. Good grief. We need new leadership. We have the White House, and we have to keep pushing Joe Biden, who is saying that he doesn't want to can't really do very much for progressives. Progressives are the ones that got him in. Black folk are the ones who got him in. Latinos are the ones who got him in. The Native American communities are the ones who got him in. Asian Americans are the ones who got him in. A cross-section of the LGBTQIA communities are the ones who got him in. Young voters got him in. But he doesn't want to do much of anything for those constituencies. The black community who he, on November 7th, 2020, loudly proclaimed in a speech in Wilmington, Delaware, that he has their back because they have his, so far, that's not really materialized. And to black people listening to this, you need to get busy with an agenda crafted. Start listening to Roland Martin. Start listening to Karen Hunter. These are people who will get you moving. And I hope I can be part of that in terms of doing my bit to get people moving. Because this is serious out here. Because the people dying like flies are black folk, native folk, Latinx. And if this guy in the White House who's coming in, at least in 30 days from now, doesn't want to do very much for progressive communities and black folk, who are the ones that basically, they saved his ass from 4 more years of Donald. I mean, if it wasn't for black folk, where would this country be right now? Can we just start with that? Where would this country be? Honestly. Without black women, where would America be right now? Right friggin' now. I'm actually going to leave it there. I was going to say a few other things. I just want to leave it there. Because I do think that's the right place to leave it. Just think that you had people out here like Jim Clyburn insulting your intelligence and telling you, defund the police is terrifying. That's the reason why that is not the reason that 12 to 15 Democrats lost their seats in the House. That is absolute garbage. It's the stimulus, stupid. Maybe that will be the progressives' slogan here as we get toward 2022. It's coming around the corner. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.